You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're tuned in to NightVision Radio, exposing the truth, one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies to keep it all from us. Welcome to NightVision Radio. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Got a really interesting show planned for you, so hope you'll hang in there with me for just a couple minutes or less while I make a couple of quick announcements. First, I'd like to draw your attention to the NightVision Radio Facebook page. I'd so much appreciate it if you would go over there and just click on like on that page. And also, it'll give you a chance to sort of just keep track of the show. I'm also inviting anyone who would like to find me. I think I'm like René, RENE Barnett, and the number 1. Because there's 2 of us René Barnetts on there who spell our names exactly the same way. But go over there and send me a friend request. And I put a lot of articles on my page. I also talk about the show, any other events that I might be involved in. And you can communicate with me, and I'd love it if either on the NightVision page or on my own personal page, send me ideas about what you'd like to see, what subjects are here, rather. This is not television, René. This is radio. So what you'd like to hear about, whatever subject matter, or if you have a recommendation for a guest. It happens all the time. And so many times, I'm so grateful for some of the wonderful guests that have been suggested or that I've been connected with through listeners. So I consider this a joint venture. So I hope that you'll hit me up on Facebook, one way or the other, on the NightVision Radio page or on my personal page, or both. And you can keep track of what's going on with NightVision and what other things I might be doing there, and we can talk. That'd be great. Also, I wanted to let you know, for all you Holy Grail seekers and history, especially hidden history buffs, people who are interested in the Knights Templar and in the bloodline mysteries, I apparently am going to be taking a trip in May back to the Languedoc area of southwest France. And I'm going to be taking a relatively small group. So anybody that's interested in coming along with me this year, I'm going to have some great speakers and guests. So please let me know on Facebook or send me an email, or if you can't find me, I know that Inception Radio can find me. So just let me know, and I'll be happy to speak with you or to send you information on the trip. It's going to be really exciting. And of course, we'll be with Henry Lincoln, the Grand Master of the entire Da Vinci Code mystery, and so much more there. And he's made some new discoveries in the region recently that he will talk to us about, along with, of course, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, of which he was one of the authors and even the last surviving author, and which was the book that sort of kicked off that whole deluge of documentaries, books, articles on this mystery that became known as the Da Vinci Code mystery. But it wasn't always known that way. But Henry was the one to kick it all off, and of course he'll be with us. And I spoke earlier with Tim Wallace Murphy, who's a best-selling author and very conversant in history of the region, particularly regarding the Knights Templar. But we're also going to have some experiential stuff because the energy in that region is just absolutely unbelievable. I know you've heard me talk about it, and you've heard me talk about it with Gloria Amendola, who I believe is going to be there with us also, about the waters there that are very special, about the telluric currents in the earth there that are really, really strong. And that area has been a magnet for different groups, from ancient Druids to Sufis to all kinds of people. There's legends of Isis temples being in the regions and on the same locations that are now medieval churches. So lots to see, lots to do. Let me know if you're interested, and I'll be happy to fill you in, and love to have you there with us. Now, without any further delay, I'd like to introduce my guest tonight. He's one of the originals. He is a UFO researcher extraordinaire. He was going back in the 50s on this thing, and so he's got a lot to say, not only about historically and what was going on back then with people like Major Donald Kehoe and with President Eisenhower, but also he's got evidence, hard physical evidence of a crash, a UFO crash in New Mexico. And no, I am not talking about Roswell. So let me introduce to you tonight Art Campbell. Art, thank you for being here with me tonight.
Glad to be with you.
Great. I'm so happy that you could join me, and thank you so much for the package that you sent to me. I did just receive it, and I haven't had a chance to go all through it, but I have gone through some of it, and I tell you, my head is spinning. It's amazing. Not only your new evidence, but I was really finding exciting the document that you sent, and you sent me a post-it on the top that you said, René, this was the state of UFOs in the 1950s. And then there were some quotes from some pretty major figures at that time that were very...
Kehoe had gathered a lot of people around him in the early days. He started his NICAP group in 57. I came on board in 58, 59, and had one of the first Midwest NICAP groups. We were in Kansas City, and I was a college student at the time.
And now NICAP stands for, I know the last two words are aerial phenomenon. Is it?
Yeah, you got that right. Let's start at the beginning. It's National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena.
That's it. Yep. And I remember hearing about that years ago. And of course, when I was working at UFO Magazine a number of years back, we ran some articles about some of the figures from the past in UFO research, like Major Donald Kehoe. He was one of the most respected people at that time in this area of research. But it looks like he was able to gather around some people that had some pretty high credentials that were willing to come out and say, yes, UFOs are real. I mean, people like Claire Booth Luce, who was the ambassador to Italy, Carl Jung, the famous psychiatrist. So many different people in the military and others. I was like Senator Barry Goldwater at that time. So they were actually saying, yeah, they're real. Now, you'd be hard pressed to find a lot of people in Washington, especially right now, that would stand up and say that.
Well, we have a much more polarized political parties and government now than we did then. And I think I look back at Eisenhower's administration, and he seemed to be the last real one we had that was, and the Congress that worked with him and Senate to get things done. That seemed to be the way to go in those days, work together and get things done. I don't think that quite carried through to today.
Oh, absolutely not. And I can see how that would add to the, inability of us to get the information out and released, and for the unwillingness of people to come forward, and they're worried about their image or what people are going to say. But you're right. I think back in those days, there was more of a camaraderie, or, more of a spirit of America that was sort of cohesive, rather than one party against another party, like it seems to be today.
We didn't have the conferences in those days that they have today. And I recall the first one was at an Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, down the area, about 1955, 54, somewhere in there.
Wow.
And George Adamski and some of the other people, the contactees, were there.
Yeah.
And then there was another one of George Van Tassel. He had a little airport and a snack bar out in the middle of the desert with a huge rock, and it was named Giant Rock. And
he built the Integratron out there.
Yeah, he did. He did. I don't think he ever went working. But
I don't think
he brought time in it.
Yeah, I think there's something about it that's supposed to spin around. It has this lip or some, sort of around the building. It's supposed to spin around, and then the idea was to reverse cell aging. I think that was supposed to be the idea, and cure disease and things like that.
Well, I would have liked his first subject, because I'd like to have some of my aging reversed.
Well, wouldn't that be great if that were true? But now there was a story that I was reading among your material, and you and I touched on the other day, about President Eisenhower going to a meeting that had to do with extraterrestrials, and they made it appear like he was going to do something else, but he...
Yeah, I wrote the story up, and if I could mention my website, we can talk about that, and I can show them what we're talking about. May I mention the website?
Sure, that's UFOcrashbook.com, right?
Yeah, www.UFOcrashbook, one word, .com, and we had an 8-part series on the Eisenhower and Holloman story that came to us about 2006, and we wrote the entire thing up for Fiverr's Files. I believe it was presented every week for about 6 or 7 weeks in 2007. So the entire thing is there for the readers to read about how Eisenhower was supposed to go hunting and came down with the sniffles, according to his press secretary. And 3 hours later, he shows up at Holloman Air Force Base in his big plane. And there were 30 press people cooling their heels, mostly at the bar in the Scott Hotel in Thomasville, Georgia, thinking he was out there playing Scrabble with Mamie. And he wasn't at all. He got on that plane and they stuck out the side gate of that plantation, and they had a lot of gates. The press weren't allowed on there. And so we're pretty sure he went up to Spence Air Force Base, where he'd come in 30 miles north of Thomasville. Snuck out, went to Holloman, was there for a day, and came back, and everybody said he looked well rested when they saw him about 24 hours later.
Now, where was that? What state is that in?
Thomasville, Georgia. It's southern Georgia. And Spence Air Force Base is a base that used to train pilots during World War II. And they left it open because Eisenhower would go down there bird hunting, and the secretary of the treasurer, named Humphrey in those days, had a plantation where he could go and have privacy, total privacy. So that was a good plus for a president. And there was a whole plane load of the press went with him. And we were at a crucial point then of the Red Chinese were shelling Quemoy and Matsu. Some of your older listeners will remember this. And Eisenhower and John Foster Dulles said that if they started any invasion, they would be nuclear weapons would be used against them. Now, I don't think that'd been an H-bomb on Beijing, but it would be possibly artillery shells they had developed at that time, and other things. And so, for most, as we know today, Taiwan remains free.
Well, now, when he made this side trip, what was it that people think that he was doing?
Well, they thought he was in Georgia hunting birds.
And so
that's what he announced to the press on the 9th of February, and the whole story is there for your listeners if they want to read it. called
And
Eisenhower at Holloman.
but what did he really do? He went. Did he actually? Did he
I
look
got
at?
a guy who was at the base hospital. Excuse me, let me interrupt you.
No. You go ahead.
Said he saw Eisenhower's plane
Yeah.
leaving Holloman Air Force Base about 4:30 or 5 o'clock one evening, and we narrowed it down about the 22nd of February, and that's 12th of February there somewhere. And we then found out that he had spoken at several places on the base, and they had advertised he was coming. And they're going to roll the red carpet out and have a little inspection, with some of the guys holding their guns or whatever. And they canceled that. And so everyone knew he was coming, so the whole base was abuzz. There was about 10,000 civilians working in Holloman those days, and about 4,500 military people. And there had a lot of shops and repair facilities and stuff there at Holloman. It was a big where a lot of work was done on the airplanes in the southwest United States, in Holloman. They had big shops there to work on it, and the people knew what they were doing. And they knew he was coming, so his plane circled the runway. Everybody saw it. Then it landed on the one runway, the only one big runway at Holloman, and stayed on the runway and didn't come back to the hangar. Well, there weren't a group of people there waiting for him, but there were people still peering out all the windows. And this friend of mine, who was a medic at Holloman, was told by his supervisor that there was a UFO hanging over one of the hangars. In those days, they didn't know what a UFO was. They called it a disc. And he had to ask about what kind of a disc. You mean like this is at high school? He said, well, it's about 25 feet across, and it's just sitting over the hangar down there. Well, he asked his permission to go out and see it. And they'd been told of low-key Eisenhower's activities when he came, and not to gawk or to do anything. So he was denied permission to go out to the hospital area to take a look at this UFO. And so we have several sides of the story. And then we found some officers talking at coffee shops that Eisenhower landed, and a silver disc landed somewhere in the front of his plane. And another guy said, well, we understood he walked out. He said, well, we couldn't tell from the distance it was Eisenhower, but it sure was his walk. And, of course, he never wore a hat, so they pretty sure it was Eisenhower. And they said that he had gone aboard for about 40 minutes. And then this was maybe 200 feet from Air Force One. A bus had come out, picked up all the crew. There were about 8 of them. And we don't know how true that is. We know Ike was there. We saw his plane. We know he spoke. He did not speak about flying saucers, though. He kind of said to people, several groups of people, keep up the good work. We know you're doing great things out here, so forth. And he was kind of stalling, I think, till the evening, till the time zone would put him back later in the East Coast. And so we think he came in about 11:30, 12 o'clock, just as the big party was coming to an end that Humphreys had put on for all the press. And you made a kick out of this. They had invited a few ladies in town who had been divorced and belonged to the country club where they were holding this party for the press. And so apparently every divorcee in town in a strapless gown showed up at that meeting, and it was free alcohol. So I think the press was well distracted that evening. I came back in, and about a half day later, he came out and had a press conference. I feel better now.
Now, was this in was Colonel Philip Corso aware of that Eisenhower visit? I was trying to remember in the book that I read years ago.
Corso, and I was the only one to research this, in addition to the gentleman that was the medic there. And
really?
So I apparently was the primary researcher on it, and we talked about it at Gaithersburg at the conference they had there in 2009.
Oh.
And the listeners can get it online, the talk, and the witnesses we dug up, and just Google Eisenhower and Campbell, it comes up.
Wow.
So, it's out there, and it's a fascinating story.
It
And then we were
really
given
is.
some a real good boost about 5 or 6 years ago when this ex-legislator came out of New Hampshire and said that he'd read a document where Eisenhower had met with several groups of aliens in the 50s. We think it's possible that one of those groups was what he found in Holloman that day.
Right. It could have been that same incident. Was there any further information from that source?
No, he got transferred 6 months later to a Air Sea Rescue Unit in Yokosuka, Japan. Yeah,
I thought you were going to say they sent him to the North Pole or something.
Yeah, and so he talked to a few people who had seen Eisenhower and heard him speak, but they wouldn't talk about what Eisenhower was saying. I'm sure it wasn't about the flying saucer, but other things. There's a lot of secret things in Parliament, still are.
Yeah.
But he's gone, and I don't know whether he's still with us or not. Last time I heard he was taking chemotherapy, but he was a good man named Bill Kirkland. And he when he said something, he said up to listen. He's the one who saw the Ike's plane coming over the barracks, and there was only one plane like it. In those days.
Now, did anyone ever come out with any information on what that meeting might have been about or how it was conducted?
Well, it's third hand, René. It's third hand, so it's pretty hard to guess what went on third hand. You go third hand, fourth hand, fifth hand.
Yeah.
So this guy heard some officers talking. That's first hand. It happened first hand. Then somebody talked about it. Then he talked about it to me. So I make the third hand.
Right.
So not many people knew that he went on the meeting, and we pulled that out. We assumed that he might have gone with our research, and your listeners can read the story.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, back in those days, in the 50s, when ufology, I guess as we term it today, was kind of a new area, because I think this sprang out of like the UFO flaps in the late 40s and in the 50s. At the time that you were actually researching UFOs, did you come upon any current cases or any evidence that was happening right then and there that you were able to look into? Or I guess
I looked into one contactee for Keyhole, and on the back of the book, Keyhole makes a very nice comment about our work, and if you have the habit, it might be there. I'm not going to tell you what it says, but you can read it if you want to. And in those days, there was a big mix-up between contactees and people who were scientifically serious. And George Adamski came to Kansas City and had a meeting, and then went to Davenport, Iowa, and came back by airplane. And he told his secretary, who was at the airport with the friends of his study club in Kansas City at the airport, that to get his tickets cashed in, because he was taken to Davenport to the Flying Saucer. After the train stopped, he got off. Well, I wrote I got on the Dr. Major Keyhole on the phone, and I said, would you like me to look into this? He said, I sure would. And I said, I'm going to send you a badge. I said, you're going to swear me in? He said, oh, no, it's just a badge. It'll get you in everywhere. Well, it did. Big old thing about 3 inches long and black case. NICAP investigator. I felt real important. Then he made me send it back to him. That was kind of painful. But, we were able to get 5 people on the railroad to make statements, including a tower operator, an engineer, a conductor, 2 chair car attendants, that the train only stopped for a couple seconds, which was an FCC, FAA rule, that one Senate track was going perpendicular to another, and any train coming to that spot had to stop and look, and which is smart. So he wouldn't have had time to get off and do anything. And he later that summer went to England, and some guy had gotten a hold of an NICAP article and confronted him with this material, and he tried to grab the papers and everything, made a real fool of himself.
And you're talking
So,
about Adamski,
yes, I am. Yes,
George Adamski. Yeah,
I met him. He's a nice man. His his mother was Polish. I think his Egyptian, and his dad was Polish. And George Adamski had spent time in World War I in the cavalry. British cavalry.
Yeah.
Quite an interesting man.
But according to your investigation, you were not able to substantiate any of his claims, and in fact, it's your opinion that his story was not true.
That's right. We could substantiate none of his claims. He claimed that the vestibule was open, and that's against the law. That's the steps. The people in the old who my age who traveled in trains remember going up a set of metal steps. And at the top of that was a door clicked onto the side of the inside of the stairway. And when the train was operational, that door came down. The steps were closed off, and you could walk over and look out a window. But vestibules were never left open.
And he claimed that he was down in the vestibule.
He claimed he got off and walked around for a few minutes. A train stopped, and somebody came up and said, had come up and said, "Well, I'd like you to come with me." And they went up and got his luggage, which was still in the vestibule.
Right.
And the train stopped for 2 seconds, and I don't think Superman could have done anything done in 2 seconds.
Unless they had missing time. Maybe they could have had missing time.
He thought it was a surprise stop, and the train crew who go to this train went to Iowa, I think about 3 times a week, and they always stop there.
Didn't that train arrive late though?
The train was late because of holiday traffic. This was December, I believe December 3rd, 1958, and there was a TWA strike. And it showed a lot of people. TWA was housed in those days in Kansas City, and it threw a lot of travel plans awry. And so you're lucky to get a ticket on a plane when there's one airline in town and this sort of strike.
Right.
And the big international airport hadn't opened up yet, like they have now in Kansas City. But no, there were a lot of people on the train, and nobody remembered him. He probably was in there just reading a newspaper or something, But no, I don't think he had any experience getting off the train or being approached by somebody says there's a UFO over here in the trees. We want to take you up there.
Yeah.
Somebody contacted the person up there where he was supposed to meet him, and he came out of the crowd at the railroad station in Davenport. And so they assumed he came up on the train. He didn't say a word to them because they'd seen him come up the stairway. So you don't know about these things.
You were able to find the people that met him that day.
We were able to found out that he had arrived at the station in Davenport and on time. So UFO could make it probably in 5 minutes, and it was an 8-hour trip by train. I don't know what they did for 8 hours. If he was in a UFO, maybe they have a sun deck. I don't know.
Wow. I think this is a good time to take a quick break here at the top of the hour. And we're talking with Art Campbell. We're talking about his extensive career as a UFO researcher. And we're going to get into some of his new events a little bit later on. So hang on to your hats. We'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hey, IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to NightVision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Hi, everyone. We're back. You're listening to Night Vision Radio. Our guest tonight is Art Campbell. I'm your host, René Barnett, and Art has been talking about his amazing career as a UFO researcher. Art, before we go any further about your research, let's let people know again that they can go to your webpage while we're talking here, and we're going to be talking, especially a little bit later in the show, about some of the very things that they're going to see there. It is UFOcrashbook.com, UFOcrashbook.com. So check it out, and Art will be talking about some particular things that you're going to see on the site. Now, Art, can you talk a little bit more about your other background, what you were doing before you got into ufology, and what kind of work that you've been involved in? Because you've had a pretty interesting life.
Well, I have had a very interesting life, and I started out pretty much like most people my age. The Korean War came along about the time I was 18, and I spent 4 years in the Navy. And I read I got interested in some paranormal stuff on the radio. I was at a shore station, kind of bored there, and I managed to get a radio hooked up to my bunk, so I was listening to Frank Edwards or somebody every night, and I got interested in the paranormal material. I wasn't buying into all of it, but I was just very interested in it. And I picked up a book by Frank Scully, the first one written. I think he wrote it in 1950, and I found it at what they call a nickel snatcher, which was a little ferry that went out to North Island from San Diego. North Island was a big pork chop-shaped island. Now this is bridges today. But we used to call this a nickel snatcher. It actually cost a dime. But anyhow, we could go to and from on the island with on this boat. Well, I was sitting there waiting with the boat one day, and I looked at this book and bought it, and I almost missed the boat. The guy said, "Hey, Mac, you coming or not?" I jumped on about the same time he did with a rope. So that was my first book, and it was Frank Scully's book. It's quite well known. Something like Flying Saucers Are Real, or something like that. And so I got out of the service and was going to a school in Kansas City. I was originally started out to be an art teacher. So I was going to a school back there called the Art Institute, and I had pursued some of these interests, and we had a UFO study club start about 1957, and I was a charter member of that. And then later on, about a year later, we moved over to NICAP. I thought there was a little more meat there with all these famous people than being with Sunday afternoon with a group of people I didn't really particularly want to be with. They were all very nice people, but viewpoints were just read as the different ones. And in those days, the contactees were mixed in with religion and all kinds of things, and even some people think they were part of the devil, and so forth and so on. So it was kind of a difficult thing to belong to a group like that. But NICAP was pretty straightforward, and it appealed to me. So we'd been a member about 6 months or so when the dad came and did his speech, and that's history, of course.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like, NICAP was sort of taken seriously. And that I think that is because the big sort of misinformation, disinformation campaign had not yet really begun. And I think there's been sort of I don't know if it's been a planned campaign, but it just seems like there's been a way of sort of like anyone saying, I saw a UFO or I had a UFO experience. People have been made fun of and not taken seriously and think, oh, they must be crazy or some kind of a nut or some kind of crazy hillbilly farmer or something like that, and that hadn't been done yet. And people were just seeing things in the sky and saying, okay, there's something there. We need to check that out.
Yeah, I think that was it came pretty easily. There were things in the sky, and they really made some pictures. They made some newspaper articles, magazine articles. I think Life magazine on 52 had a big long series of articles. I don't know if it was one issue or more, but are we being visited? And that same summer that was when they had them fly over UFOs in Washington, D.C. I think there were 34 UFOs flying around in the background of the Capitol. There's some famous pictures of it around. And so apparently they didn't particularly want to be hidden at the time. Their interest in us primarily was our nuclear capacity. And they would manage to fly over all the sites where there were nuclear bombs being stored or where they're being made. And that possibly may have had something to do with Eisenhower in 55. And as a matter of fact, the first World Peace meeting was in the fall of 55, I believe. And it took 40 years for the Soviet Union to collapse and other things like that. But I think Eisenhower might have been part of that.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty wild. Now, were you did you do any looking into at all the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case? When was that? 69 or something like that?
Yeah, the book was 69. I think the thing happened in 64. I had a friend here I live in Oregon, in Medford, Oregon, and a friend of mine had been corresponding with Betty Hill. And so I didn't really do anything more than talk to this friend, and I read their book, and they were still alive and in the somewhere on the East Coast, so they didn't speak. I don't think Betty ever spoke, at least not where I could hear. And at that time, the topic of aliens was more taboo than the UFOs were.
Right.
Somebody had to be inside those things or controlling them remotely from somewhere. But when I started teaching in 1960, I thought, well, I'm going to put this on the wall, hang it up for a while. And I was in small towns, and there was hardly anybody there interested in UFOs, and so it worked out just fine. And but when I came back in, all the talk was about aliens. I saw a display in the shopping center in 1989 when I retired. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute here. This bug-eyed thing, are they inside, So 30 years, I'd kind of been left in the dust, so to speak. So I worked on it 4 or 5 years before after 89, when I retired, before I came to this site. And Stanton Friedman was the one who told me about it.
That's right. That's right. Now, I mean, of course, I don't know anybody who hasn't heard ad nauseum about, and I don't mean that in a bad way, about Roswell. Roswell, you say just that name, and people immediately think of UFO crash, 1947, July. But and then we've heard about the crash at Corona. We've heard of the crash at Socorro. But you're talking about a site that Stanton Friedman, who's is he nuclear physicist? Was that his title? He's a physicist. I know that. Nuclear physicist, and a long time again researcher, told you, because you said, "Oh my gosh, I wish I'd have gotten a chance to get at a crash site." Of course.
Well, that's exactly what I said, Renee.
I guess Roswell had been completely decimated already. There wasn't anything really left there, I guess.
Well, he'd been out there in 1990 and was staying there with one of the guys who had discovered it. A civilian who's still alive, by the way.
And what was that guy's name?
Gerald Anderson.
Oh, Gerald Anderson was the one that discovered it.
Yeah, he discredited himself early on by offering a phone bill, and the entire UFO community said, "Well, he must be a liar, so we won't believe anything he says." But on Stanton Friedman's crash at Corona, by the way, was another version of Roswell. The crash material was closer to a little town of Corona, and Roswell was 75 miles away. So he just named his book "A Crash at Corona." In any case, at page 70, for any of your listeners who have "Crash at Corona" by Stanton Friedman, I believe Verlander was the other author, can turn to page 70 and see George Anderson pointing up a hill with 4 men behind him, exactly where we found the UFO material.
And that is St. Augustine.
Yes, it is.
That's St. Augustine, New Mexico. So
it's an old dry lake bed. It's 50 miles long, about 15 to 10 miles wide in various places. And glaciers had melted in the area during the Ice Age. And nowhere for the water to go but down in this basin. And it didn't have a river running into it. So over about 5,000 year period, 165 feet of water evaporated every year. And this was perfect place for the Native Americans to come. They could fish. There's birds. There's game. Things like that. So it was quite a Native American. There's a lot of Indian material around there, and we found some areas where the lake had been over 165 feet deep at one time, and it left a lot of silt. We had to dig through it sometimes. We were looking for stuff. And below that, though, was some chalky ground, which apparently was the original bottom of the lake bed. So it was quite an effort. But Friedman had been there, and with several other well-known UFO people at the time. And they're standing here in 1990 pointing uphill.
And now, this crash is how far from the so-called crash at Roswell or crash at Corona?
160 miles. 160 miles from Roswell.
The
Roswell crash happened 75 miles north, and I think the Brieffield was about 30 miles north.
And then, what do they? And when was this crash at St. Augustine? When did that happen?
July 2nd, 1947 was when it was first discovered.
So the day before.
4 days before the Roswell material was brought to town.
Oh. Oh, wow. So it was before. So you don't think it was all one event?
Well, it's possible they collided. And one went down, they could have collided over the town of Socorro. One went to Roswell and one went down here.
And one just was discovered before.
Roswell.
And one was just maybe discovered before the other one.
Well, we think this was an isolated place, hard to get into. there was a lot of lock gates. They're not worried about cattle getting out, but rustlers coming in was a big problem. And we think an inexperienced military unit came up there and tried to cover over everything with some sandy loam dirt that got out of the arroyo. And somebody didn't tell them there were 14 inches of rain every year. And some of the material we found on the surface. Literally found it on the surface.
Yeah, I know. There are photographs of some of those materials on your website. If people want to hop over there and have a look, that's UFOcrashbook.com.
Yes,
UFO
we
crash
have
book.
a kind of a running narration there of on the side of the left-hand side of the margin. We show at least 7 or 8 items that we found there, and then we have chapters down below that in red numbers, and every red number on there is a chapter of the book telling you what's in it. There's a thumbnail sketch of it.
Oh, okay. Now, can you just describe, for people who may not be looking at it, or even for people that are, what are some of the objects or some of the materials that you did find?
The first stuff we found was foil, and it was laying all over the place. And we checked it out to see if it could be barbecue foil or something like that. They didn't sell foil in that area to the ranch wives. They had their own ways of putting up produce in those days. They'd can, they'd eat fresh meat. They'd have they didn't have power till 1989, so they couldn't use freezers. So the Western way of preserving food was they did quite well without foil. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I found out, see it advertised in the newspapers, and one ranch lady said, well, we got a roll. We was in a home ec class about 1955 or so, and we didn't know what to do with it. And somebody baked cookies on it. It just didn't last long after that. So they hadn't even used it. So there weren't enough people out there to have barbecues. There wouldn't be more than a dozen people living a mile away. And what's all this foil doing here? Well, it turned out the foil had some coatings on it, important elements on one side. It was mostly aluminum, and on the one side would be 35 or 40 different elements on the other side of the foil. And we think about a dozen of them were main elements that the aliens added for whatever reason, and the rest of them were trace elements that happened to be in the aluminum they were using.
Now, did that have any qualities, that metal, like the metal that we heard Jesse Marcel talking about from the?
Yes.
Did it was it what we're hearing called memory metal? One of our chat room members is asking the same question. He says memory metal.
I get this question often.
I bet.
We don't remember any memory metal, and as a matter of fact, the foil we found, you could wad it up, put it in your pocket, and make a wonderful paper wad to throw at school. It wouldn't come unfolded if you wanted to. So, So what we found, I think the story is true, but this foil had been out there 60 years, and whatever qualities it might have had on it, we found pieces sort of like the old-fashioned wood shingles, and we think they were kind of laid inside the craft for whatever reason. We don't know why, and each one was different. And each one had a different formula. And again, your listeners, if they get to a button on the internet, on the website called Metal Analysis Colbert, they'll find what a wonderful job he did of analyzing these pieces of foil. And there's 42-page report there on the first 6 pieces of metal we had. 5 of them were foil.
And was there anything
downloadable? Yeah.
Was there something unusual about it that didn't make it seem like it came from Earth?
It was different thicknesses. We did quite a bit of work with the aluminum foil industry, and they came to up and coming because of the amount of aluminum that was left over World War II. That's how the foil companies got started. And if you could buy a roll of Alcoa or a Reynolds wrap at the store, They will probably 99% aluminum, maybe 0.5% iron and 0.5% silicon. It's almost pure aluminum.
Right.
And these things had up to 40 different elements on one side. And it was amazing. We kept picking it up. We knew what it was. And Mr. Rao with the Open Minds Organization paid to have them analyzed.
Wow.
And they came up with all these coatings, and they could be seen in that report.
And what was the most compelling piece of evidence that you found there, or I guess maybe the most unusual thing?
Well, we expect to find metal around a plane crash, and we assume there'd be metal there if we dig deep enough. But there's two things that come to mind. Down about halfway down on the group of pictures on my website are two things that we call honeycombs. And they're like a thick wasp nest, and they're about 1.5 inches thick. And apparently they sat between an inner and outer layer on the craft. And something interacted inside the honeycomb, causing probably some power to be generated, possibly anti-gravity. And so they're actually using these aluminum honeycombs to produce power at the bottom of the craft. Because the craft came in and it scraped off maybe something about the size of a card table on the bottom of it, and that's the material. Some of that material we found, and that was fascinating. Then the other thing is called the artifact, and it's down lower in the sequence at the actual bottom there, and called possible ET artifact or body part. And this is where Colonel Corso comes in. He said that the Army R&D had discovered that the alien bodies, some of them had artificial parts, and this may be an artificial part of a clone. Maybe. It's about the size of your fist.
Wow.
And we got inside there and found some very interesting stuff. Found a little gold wire, flattened gold wire, and other stuff, but we've never cut it open, so we don't know exactly. We don't plan to cut it open either, so it'd ruin it if it was cut open. But another one that a lot of women are interested in this brings out the maternal aspect of the whole thing, is they found a tiny shoe sole. It's at the bottom of the website, homepage. It looked pink, but I try to get faded red. It's pretty hard to make something faded red. It's not pink, but we found that fabric on that shoe, the outer fabric, we pulled some out from underneath the sole, and was red or maroon. And here's little aliens running around with gray uniforms and pink shoes. That must be a fashion statement in itself. And we don't think the shoe probably may not have been worn. Colonel Corso thought that the alien body had some circuitry going through it, and they were able to control the craft by laying in a certain part of the circuitry and manipulating the controls. It wasn't flown like one of our planes. And rubber shoes wouldn't have worked in that, because if the current was supposed to come through, it wouldn't have gone through your feet. So we think that somewhere, if they in the little craft, we think it was about 25, 30 feet across, that these shoes were blown off of an alien or were in storage, and they came out when there was a big split in the side of the craft, and they found 4 bodies came out, 3 bodies, and they think maybe that belonged to one of those. And unusual because it's 4 7/8 inches long, and it's only 1.25 inches wide in front of the heel. Now, all of us have grown through 4 7/8 inch split, but it's also 3 inches wide. And we sent this material off to about 30 different shoe companies, and they had no idea what it was.
Wow. They had no idea what the material was?
Oh, we knew what the material was. We have that drawn in a diagram in the book. We broke down all the material, and there's 9 layers of different stuff there. Some of it was cellulose, there's some linen, there's some cotton. All of them had something added to it we couldn't identify. The fibers were coated with some material that was unidentifiable to the people who were doing our work. We had some very famous labs working on it, and McCrone Associates in the Chicago area was the one that did most of our work on the shoe. And I had to find it and say, well, we found it at a stage stop. But they said, we've never seen it like this.
Now, you said it was like a small shoe sole, right? So
yeah, we found the sole. Yeah, it's pictured down there.
And then, how big was it?
4 7/8 inches long. The narrowest part in front of the heel was 1 1/4 inches.
And it was shaped just like a shoe sole. For those who can't see the website at the moment, is it shaped just like a regular shoe sole? I mean, was that how you knew it was a shoe sole, because that's how it was shaped?
No, we were sure it was, because shoe soles are pretty common, and everybody wears them.
And you thought, did you think at first maybe this is a child's shoe sole?
Well, I thought maybe, possibly at first it might have been a child, and then I read this research and found out that child's feet grow outward also. About the time they start running around, the feet widen out, the arches develop. And by the way, the shoe did not, we saw no sign of an arch support. And I got it to a fellow at Nike one time, and they said, well, we can't look at any other shoe that's been made by anybody else. And I said, well, I just thought I'd drop by and ask some questions. He said, no, we can't help you. So some guy came to me in the parking lot and said, can I meet you for coffee afterwards? I want to see that shoe sole. Yeah. So I met him at Starbucks for a cup of coffee, and he said, where'd you get this? Well, we found it out in the desert, and I didn't tell you about UFOs at all. And he said, we couldn't make a shoe like this and make any profit. I don't know who could make a shoe with 9 layers like this and make a profit. And I didn't have hard to tell him it wasn't probably made here.
Wow. And you did, but you said you did check with shoe manufacturers, and you couldn't identify any company that would make a shoe.
Adults, cowboy boots, moccasins. We wrote almost 30 of them. Heard back about 15.
And what did they?
I did a shoe for a pygmy.
Wow.
And I looked them up. They got very wide feet. Wouldn't have been that.
Yeah. Huh.
So it was a mystery. It will always remain a mystery until we find the foot that fits it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not holding my breath, though, René.
Now, it's actually about time for our second break here. So I think this is a good time for it. I hope that my producer, MJ, concurs with that. And we are talking with Art Campbell. He is a UFO researcher for many, many years, and he has his particular case that he's talking about right now is a crash into Mexico, not Roswell, but St. Augustine, where he has actual physical evidence that has been evaluated. So hold on, we're going to be right back.
Everyone, Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hey, IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to Night Vision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Welcome back to Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, René Barnett, and we're talking tonight with Art Campbell about UFOs. In particular, UFOs from the 50s, the 60s, and forward, and especially a case that Art has put a lot of time in over the past several years of a crash site in St. Augustine, New Mexico. Just a short distance from the Roswell crash. Could have been part of that same incident. We don't know whether two UFOs might have crashed together. Somebody had mentioned the idea to me today, Art, when I was telling him about the show tonight, that they were wondering whether or not it could have been one craft that exploded in the sky, and maybe there were 2 or 3 explosions before it was finally all the debris fell to the earth. Do you think that's a possibility at all?
Roswell researchers thought that the plane of St. Augustine might have been part of the Roswell crash. But apparently there were 2 crafts, and the craft at Roswell was not a disc. It was something like a flat glider, like a paper airplane you make in grade school or something. And then ours was a round disc that was probably 4 or 5 tons as it sat there, and it has been explored, but nothing has ever come of it. They did find some small pieces of foil over on the Roswell debris field that are very similar to ours. We had about 12 different kinds of foil. Different thicknesses, different types, and they did find a tiny little bit over on the Roswell debris fields. But apparently the propulsion system, for all I know, it might have been in the bottom where the engine is, trying to reflect energy, and I don't know what it was for. But anyhow, we found quite a bit of other stuff. And one of the more fascinating things is, those who have the website up, there's a thing in the middle, two honeycombs. And
if you're just, let me just say this, Art, if you're just tuning in or you didn't catch it before, the site that Art's talking about right now that he's referring to is ufocrashbook.com. So you can go there and see exactly what he's talking about right now, and you can also order his book on that site. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead, Art.
Yeah, we'll probably get some people in the car, too. They don't have computers, but they can go home, and all they got to remember is UFO Crash Book and put it in there, and all the stuff comes up on the homepage. In any case, we found that the honeycomb we found in 2012 on the plane of St. Augustine was identical to a honeycomb found in Japan in 1971 when someone saw a UFO explode. and we show pictures of it right there on the left-hand side of the homepage. And one of them is 71, and one is 2012. The 71 one was an explosion. A guy saw it explode, and he went over the next day and picked up some things about 20 inches by maybe about 15 or 20 inches the other way. And somebody came and photographed that, put it in a book in 1980. It's out of print now. It's called Alien Hunting. But
It's called what?
The book was two Australian writers, named Reisman and Pinkham, I believe it was.
And you said the name of the book, Alien Hunting?
Honeycomb.
Oh, Alien Honeycomb.
Yeah.
Gosh, I haven't even heard of that. I'm going to have to look that up. But
it's out of print, and I found a print of it. It cost me $75. But,
wow.
Boy, it was worth it.
Wow.
And we found something that's 40 years later, identical. Well, theirs was just one day old because they saw the UFO explode. Ours was in the elements for 60 years underground, and maybe stuffed in rock somewhere.
Now,
So,
you found all these different pieces, all these different pieces of metal and other evidence. You talked about the shoe sole and other things. Now, if you were to gather it all up, like, could you get it all in one box?
Yeah, I think one of those mailing boxes that the post office has that you can buy about 14 inches long, maybe a foot wide, 2 inches thick. We could fill it up easily.
And so there's a number of pieces of things. I know one of my chat roomies here, Neutron, was asking, had any of your evidence ever disappeared? Did somebody ever try to take any of it, or did you have anything mysterious happening to it when you were trying to do your investigation?
Actually, we've had it at a few conferences, and I have that artifact there. It's in a plastic box, and I've done everything but chain it down. And I let people look at it and say, just don't let it get over the ground, don't drop it. And we've never had any problems at all. Now, I do have one guy who found a lot of stuff who gives away pieces to people to kind of make friends. So he has some of these big pieces, and you can see where they're going to cut into. But they're people in the laboratories that say, well, we could look this up for you and so forth. So some of our stuff goes out that way. But we still have 90% of it left. And I have almost 99% of everything I found out there. So I've saved it all these years.
In that honeycomb, what is that? I mean, what is the composition of that?
Well, it's mostly aluminum and has some calcium in it, and one of the elements, and there was I believe manganese, and we found some moss growing on it, and a botanist told us that they'd have to have calcium and manganese to for a moss culture to start up, and we went to check it. Sure enough, we had calcium and manganese. And that moss on top of it is brown. That means it was out of sunlight. And where it was laying on the ground and in the sunlight, the moss is green.
Wow.
So, we found we do a lot of research about geology and arroyos, and there's just no end of things you have to find out if you're going to make a pronouncement. But those two honeycombs, 40 years apart, look pretty similar.
Yeah.
And we think a pretty good judge of what we have.
That is really wild. Very interesting. Ooh. Now,
we have rotating pictures going through, about a dozen of them going through, showing various things. And we had, at one time, 15 people were working with 3 metal detectors. And there's been about 26 people involved in this project since about 2005. Originally, we had a crew of Navajos out there, just really worked hard, really worked well. And they did something like 28 test bits in about 3 days. And their test bit would be about 4 feet wide, 4 feet long, 4 feet square, and about 20 inches deep. Anything below 20 inches was rock, So we didn't want to go down that low, but we were skimming the surface fairly.
Wow. Now, you were saying on your website is that the most important material was the I-beam. And
we haven't talked about that yet. I'm going to run back up and look at that. That's on that site, www.ufocrashbook.com.
That's right, and it's in the chapter 6
page.
It
was found in 2012, and it was found in some rocks, wedged in some rocks. And we have a whole chapter on it, chapter and a half in the book. And it had some a whole lot of metallurgy in it that we don't have. We don't have on this on our planet. We don't know.
Wow! Now I'm looking.
Manganese and other things, and a lot of silicone, mostly aluminum, but with all these additives in it. And this one had some crude holes drilled in it. You can see them on the side there. Yeah. And we think that we don't think that a UFO was bolted together with holes. We think that was a repair. They put that the I-beam probably went behind the plate, and on the other side of that was a honeycomb and another plate. So we think there was a bowl type structure, like a cereal bowl, of I-beams. Then we had what we call a light metal on the inside of the I-beam. Then we had the honeycomb. And then we had the heavy metal on the other side of the honeycomb. So it sort of made a sandwich. And that's
now, is there some kind of engraving on the side of that I-beam? I'm looking at it, and it looks like there's a triangle with a circle in the middle.
Yeah, that's chapter. That would be just a minute here.
Chapter 6.
I'm pulling it up.
It's chapter 6, isn't it?
It's the beginning of chapter 6, and your listeners could click on this red number 6 down there where the chapters are listed, and see a picture of the I-beam and another piece of honeycomb with metal stuck to it. We found on the right end a triangle that was 2 inches high, and a little bit more like an inch and a half at the bottom. So it was an isosceles triangle. It wasn't equilateral. And in the middle was a circle. And we thought, well, what are they trying to tell us? Well, I don't think anybody in their right mind would say that an advanced civilization uses hieroglyphics. You know, how would they do math in hieroglyphics? So I assumed it was a maker's mark, and it looked like it had been used before, and the holes were very crude. And one guy tried to come in here from an Eastern MUFON group, Mutual UFO Network, and tried to convince everybody this was an airplane part. The plane crashed in 1944, and this was 3 miles away from that. We knew about that crash. But we don't have anything with this kind of engraving on it. So I think it was a maker's mark. And then we did a dumb thing. It turned out to be quite fortunate. We rubbed some butter on it and then put some graphite on it, the black graphite you use in the locks of the car, the black powder.
Right.
And we saw additional circles partial circles coming in from behind that triangle. And in the book, we show how it looked. And so apparently, we were looking here at an eclipse because we show partial circles of the same triangle. Right. There were 5 of them overlapping each other, and there wasn't a full circle, only full circles in the middle. So it kind of looked like the eclipse was coming in from behind, and we only see partial circles. But they were real. They were really there. And so somebody asked me, what did you deduce from this? I said, well, I think possibly the aliens, at least some of them, may have great reverence for celestial events. Well, who doesn't?
Yes.
So, we get all on Twitter, we have another eclipse, or something like that. So I think all of us have a reverence for those kind of things, regardless of what we believe. We know that here it is. Who made it and how it got there is unimportant. The fact that this is happening. So that's all we could guess. And then we found that there was a UFO landed in Britain called Rendlesham Forest, and a craft came down with a triangle on it, and it had a circle on two circles, one on a big circle, one on a small one, and we assumed that was looked to us like a symbol of a planet moving around the sun. And that was on a craft that came down in 1980 in England, at a joint air base in the Rendlesham Forest. Wetwaters, I believe was the name it was called.
Yeah, Bentwaters. Yeah, we had fairly recently, we had John Burroughs, who was present at the Bentwaters incident on, and that was quite an amazing, thing.
Quite an amazing sighting. Yes, it was.
Yeah. Did you do any looking into that? I mean, I know you've spent so much time on this particular case, but before, I think you got started on this case when, in 1990?
I started at the site in 1994.
94.
Uh-huh. And I was there by myself till 2004.
Yep.
Years. I worked
Wow.
about every other year I got there and worked. And I found quite a bit of stuff, including the artifact, and a lot of foil, and other things. But we didn't find the big stuff until we got up on the hill where the craft had skipped down. And it apparently, when it skipped, it drove some material underground. And apparently the cleanup crew was using metal detectors. So they just covered it over. And this I-beam was laying in some rocks, like it had just fallen out of the sky, and it wedged itself in a couple of rocks. It's 13 inches long, by the way, weighs 13 pounds, 13 and a quarter. It's the flanges are 2 inches wide on both sides, and the post in the middle is about 1.5 inches. And we have H-shaped beams like this, but they're made to distribute horizontal stress, not vertical. The standard I-beam we find in the skyscrapers is much shorter on the flanges. And this one was made to distribute horizontal loads, which would be perfect for a UFO.
Now, who owns the land that your crash site is on?
Well, the land out there in the plains is kind of a complicated deal. You lease land from the state, the government, or individuals who are living in our state. And so everybody's land looks like a patchwork quilt. You look at a map of it.
Right.
And you have a piece of BLM land that's leased for so much a year. You may have a piece of private land adjoining one corner of it. You may have a piece of state land there. So private parties, U.S. government, and state all own parcels.
So the federal government, the federal government via the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM.
Yes, they would be the ones who would be leasing the land.
Right. Boy, they seem to lease the BLM seems to be involved in a lot of sites that are related to UFOs, don't they?
Well, they have a lot of land, and
well, maybe that's it.
Take a stand on it, but there certainly would be a chance of finding UFOs in the right kind of land. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they haven't interfered at all with anything. So we pretty well. They're more concerned about the ranchers and the cattle. And the ranchers think it's kind of interesting. They like to see some people come on their land, particularly the older ones that don't get company very often. But they still keep the gates locked.
Right. Well, now, what are your plans for your case? Have you pretty much researched it now as much as you're going to? I know you've released a book on it, which you can get on your site.
We're going to sit on that for a while, René.
Mm-hmm.
We released a book on it, and you can get it through the website. It says how to order the book. And we get some very nice comments from readers We're selling it through Creative Space, Amazon, and it runs right through how to order on the website. If I recall, the price has been knocked down to about $22.65 for a 150-page book with 90 photographs. It's a pretty good deal.
And it's not a little book. It's a large, like 8.5 by 11 page. So it's not a tiny 150-page book.
It weighs a pound. Weighs 15 ounces. So I have to when I mail it, I have to pay for an extra 10 ounces.
Yeah, I see you got lots of compliments from some pretty high people talking about how well researched it is, and how well the evidence was presented.
About 10 years on it altogether, and it took me about 5 years just to plan it. And the problem was we started finding stuff when I thought I was done. And so that kind of messed up my index. So I've got to go back and do some more work on editing and the index and so forth. But we pretty well got it 90% where we want it.
Yeah. Timothy Good, who everybody knows, he's a noted author from the UK and a researcher. And he says it's superbly researched. And Donald Kehoe, and he talks about you and your good work, and so does nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman. So it's a great thing to have, to own. It's a nice big book, so not teeny tiny writing, and lots of good illustrations, pictures, statistics. I mean, this is the real deal. That's UFOcrashbook.com. Now, have you got any plans in the future to make any presentations on this, or going to be?
I'm available for presentations. I live in the Pacific Northwest, pretty isolated. I don't get around quite as much as the Eastern ufologists do.
Right.
But I'll be glad to go anywhere at any time if somebody sends me a ticket.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe one of these conferences coming up, because I think this would be a great presentation. And it's certainly
at a few conferences, but apparently I'm in the first generation, and now they're more into conspiracies and with the UFO sighting in on JFK, and it really gets ridiculous.
Well, I tell you, it's like I wouldn't think that it would ever hurt to get, the background on this thing. We should be taking advantage, in a good way, of people like you who have been there throughout the history of the study of UFOs. I mean, my goodness, I had a million questions for you regarding Eisenhower, the Roswell crash, this crash, other things that you heard about. That's why I was asking you about things like Betty and Barney Hill. Like at the time, what were people saying about it? I know I had a chance to talk to Betty Hill on several occasions. We got to kind of be friends a little bit. And I'm so glad. Of course, Barney had been long gone by then. He died fairly early on. But she struck me as being a very down-to-earth lady. And she was...
She appears to be. And do you remember who played the part of Barney in the movie?
Yes, James Earl Jones.
James Earl Jones, yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. Now they called the book was called Interrupted Journey, but the movie was called something else. I don't remember.
I don't recall what it was. There is something that happened before I left. Before I left UFOs and I got back in, I mentioned that the eyes got bigger. And it seems like the first time we have a description of the large eyes is in the Betty Barney Hill case. That's 1965 or so. Before that, they were fairly small eyes. And so I suppose those large-eyed things may be clones. I don't know whether they're biological or not, but...
I was wondering if they might be robots or something.
Yeah,
but because people talk about them moving in a sort of robotic way. But the other idea is, okay, we have a lot of people who are willing to accept the idea that there are things, flying around out there and that they seem to be intelligently controlled. Well, that means that somebody intelligent is controlling them. And so if we accept that and accept the idea that there are beings from other places coming here, then maybe some of them do look different than others. Maybe there some that are have smaller eyes. Maybe some have bigger eyes. You hear people talking about the different races, and I mean, of course.
Barney Barnett, the soil conservation engineer that discovered this site, described the first one to describe gray
I wonder
aliens.
if I'm related to him.
I don't know. He came from, I believe, Oklahoma-Texas line, somewhere in that area.
I'm from Oklahoma.
And whereabouts in Oklahoma?
Oh, I came from a very small town in southeastern Oklahoma called Stigler, and I lived. It's down by the by the Arkansas state line, in the Choctaw Nation.
People come from Oklahoma, that's for sure. We had a lot of relatives around Tulsa.
Well, I lived in Tulsa for a number of years and worked
the
in.
reason makes me interested. I occasionally get asked if I've ever been hassled by anybody. And I went to my lawyer, and I said, "What happens if I?" She said, "Well, you don't have to let them in or ask or answer any questions. You just hand them this." I said, "I had one." She said, "My business card." She said, "If you hand a questionnaire, somebody who has a lot of questions for you, this card, then they can't talk to you without me being present." And I said, "Great deal, hey, So I put the card by my front door with a thumbtack. And our computer faced the sidewalk one day. I saw two guys in black coming up. I said, "Oh, my God." A big black van parked out there in front, a big black briefcase. And I thought, well, I better get that card. I'm going to need it. And I was reaching for it as I opened the door, and I was never so relieved of my wife to find two Mormon missionaries.
I bet you went, whoo!
And I said, "I don't know what you're drinking, but come on in, I'm pouring." And so they both had a glass of lemonade. It was the summertime. And that's as close as I came to the men in black.
Well, that's good. You always hear about people being harassed and, their offices broken into and all that. Now, I've never really, within the UFO genre, had anything like that occur. And then, I spent a number of years at UFO Magazine, and it was kind of a clearinghouse for a lot of the information that was coming in about UFOs. And we never...
Burns Future Theater about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I was there pre-Bill Burns. I was there from the early 90s to the mid-90s, and then Bill and Nancy came not too long after that. In fact, I was there at a couple of dinner meetings with them as they were sort of passing along into the running of the magazine. But that's when I left to go do television. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff going through our offices, reports, witnesses calling, different things like that. And we never had any harassment that we could ever tell. I mean, we did, unfortunately, from some of the UFO people, some of the ufologists, there was a lot of infighting going on with people.
Well, now that's still going on.
Yeah, I think that does in every...
What are you going to do when so-and-so's article comes out and debunks your whole project? I said, well, you can't do it. But she goes to Japan and talks to the guy that found the honeycomb over there. My job is what I've always done. I want to write something that's coherent, that's detailed, and I want people to make up their own minds. And that's all an author can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we want to tell before we go, and oh my goodness, we're just down to about a minute. I can't believe it. We want to one more time remind people that there is a book that contains all the information on the UFO crash at St. Augustine, New Mexico, by Art Campbell. And you can find that at ufocrashbook.com. So please go there and take a look at it.
Well, I'm told it's one of a kind. There's no books like it.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that. I just received my copy, so I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing. But looking through it, it's very comprehensive and it's very interesting. And that shoe is just amazing. That shoe sole that you found, that is crazy.
I got a 25-cent piece laying there by it, and that gives you an idea of the size it is.
Oh.
I walked over that shoe about 2 years before I finally picked it up.
And you probably just thought it wasn't associated with the...
There's other civilian stuff laying there, and it's all Royal, because the locals dump their trash in the nearest to Royal. They didn't come washing down in the kind of area where we work. So I looked at things,